Welcome to Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I've been looking forward to speaking with you and being on your podcast. The accent's from New Zealand. Sometimes people mix it up with Australians, and I remind them that there's about 10 IQ points difference in that, and very quickly find out who the Australians are in the audience. But came to the US on a swimming scholarship. I was at UC Berkeley way back in the 80s. Finished off my swimming career, won an Olympic medal in 1988 in the Seoul Olympics. During college, met my wife-to-be. We got married in 1990, went back to New Zealand, came back to the US, and I was working in the financial services industry. I've been working in this industry since then, for over 20 years now, both as an advisor and coach to advisors. And so, I've done a number of things within that space, been a jail chaplain for over 15 years when I was back in California. So had a varied career, married to my lovely wife for 34 years, and we have a 29-year-old son in Washington State.
Nice. Awesome. I appreciate the backstory. I definitely want to get into the Olympic stuff a little bit more. But before that, Sure. The reason that we thought this would be a good podcast and you'd be a good guest is our topic today is how we can help clients or just the public in general select the financial advisor that's right for them. And I think this is an important topic because there's a lot of different people out there that, have the title financial advisor, but they might be giving different kinds of advice or they might have a certain expertise. And I think that you're 3 decades of experience, 3+ decades of experience working in different capacities. And I'll let you get more into that if you want to, but different capacities around the financial services industry has allowed you to see things from different angles. And I think you're going to have some good insight about that. Would you mind just going through sort of a brief summary, if you will, of the different roles that you've had in your career?
Sure. So when I came back here in 2001, I was part of Morgan Stanley. So I was working there as an advisor and was actually in the second to last training class in 2001 before 9/11 happened in the World Trade Centers for 3 weeks there in the buildings. But I saw very quickly there a number of advisors who just were not going to stick with it. They were not prepared to persevere and learn things the way they needed to for their clients' sake. So went and started speaking to advisors, helping them overcome the obstacles many of them had, helping them focus on really, what mattered most, helping them learn how to communicate with people in ordinary English, ordinary language that others, the general public understood and found helpful. Most recently, or relative to the advising side, when we were still living in the San Francisco Bay Area, was working as a financial advisor again with a wealth management company. We were a team of 9. We loved our clients and we were just a wonderful team. It was a great time together. So I was there with them for 4 years. And then we moved away from the Bay Area to move to Greenville, South Carolina, where now I now work with advisors, coaching them, and now with a bit of age on my side, a little bit more, and life experience, and now in my mid-50s, meeting advisors who want to work with my wife and myself. It just helps round out the experience of what people need to hear from the person that they're going to entrust a super important part of their life with.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the next topic I wanted to get to. Before that, though, you mentioned speaking the language or I always find it fascinating to take a complex financial topic, which even if I as an advisor understand it perfectly crystal clear, it's absolutely useless if I can't communicate it to the end client. So what are some things that you found helpful in that experience?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Alex. It's having been an Olympic medalist in swimming, we had to learn to swim school, and people just assumed that, I'd make a great learn to swim teacher. But oftentimes the people that really do know the nuances don't necessarily know how to communicate them, most effectively, and understand, hey, while they understand it cerebrally and intellectually, they've got to be able to communicate that into basic everyday language that the listener understands. And so there's got to be an understanding from advisors that they may be talking with, let's just say 4 people in a room. Each of those people hear things differently. And so it's understanding how best to communicate this important principle in a very straightforward way that everyone leaves the room understanding, got it. That's exactly what you're saying. It's exactly how I'm interpreting it. And the four of them, they need to be correct in, those assumptions for each of them.
Sure. I like the way you said that. And I think for a lot of disciplines, whether it's what we do, even medicine, whatever it is,
Yeah,
you have to break it down to what does the client or the patient or the end person actually need to know.
that's
If you
right.
go to the doctor and they say, we need to do knee surgery, do you need to understand everything that's happening with the surgery? Or do you need to understand that you're going to get this thing done to your knee? You need to stay off it for 2 months after, let it recover, do your physical therapy. Like, you don't need to know all the minute details. And same thing in our industry.
That's right. That's right. And I think particularly in our industry too, it's important. I think as a culture, especially right now, people confuse mundane with boring. And to your point about knee surgery, you imagine if that surgeon comes in and says, "Hey, tomorrow's my 1000th knee operation. We're going to do it completely different. I'm going to try it right-handed instead of left-handed." And who knows? Well, don't do that. Just do what you've done day in, day out. That's gotten you to this position now where people trust you, they believe in what you're going to do, and let's just do the same thing. And so I think it's hugely important for people looking to work with advisors that they're working with someone who gets excited about just delivering the same process that's worked for them over the years, day in, day out, and find that exciting.
Sure. I think that's great. Let's turn our focus to what do people need to know when they're selecting this financial advisor? So the first sort of question along those lines I threw at you is like, when do you know that you need to work with a financial advisor? I think we see people that have always had an advisor from the time they got their first job to people that kind of get through that first couple of decades of their career, and then something happens that motivates them to start working with professionals. So in your mind, when is it the right time to seek professional advice in our industry?
I think there's never a bad time, especially the way that our industry has shaped some of the offerings now, where now you can get advice and pay hourly. And it's like the health situation. Everyone knows if I start running and eat properly, I'm going to improve my health. But when you start learning about everything that happens with what we ingest and the chemistry that's going on inside of us physiologically, all of a sudden everything becomes important, or everything at least becomes interesting and then somewhat measurable. At least you're aware of it. Very similar thing with finances. It's not just a matter of, hey, there's a stock market there that we can invest in. That's just part of the puzzle. Now, it's not so much what you make, but it's how much you keep of what you make, which turns that into a tax question. And we know that we don't know a load of stuff about tax because there's people like yourselves and professionals who do this. And so I think recognizing that there's a lot more to it, and not to be afraid with acknowledging that and recognizing, and that's not my area of specialty. And then, meeting up with someone like yourself to learn more about how you help the people, that you're working with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's actually, we've on our end, because we worked with so many people that were maybe working with a financial advisor for the first time, and you had that introductory meeting, and you can tell sitting across the table from a client a lot of times that they just like, they don't know what to ask. They've never worked with
Right.
an advisor before. They know they should be asking certain questions, but maybe they don't know what those are. So we've actually compiled a list that we have a PDF document of things you should ask your financial advisor, is the title of it. And it's probably 10 to 12 different bullet points. And I think it's helpful for people. So a lot of times we'll actually have that printed off, give it to the client, allow them to fire the questions at us, but also allow them to ask any other advisor they might
Sure.
meet with. It might not work out with us, but if they want to take that list going forward, I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
So a lot of those questions have to do with experience and focus, credentials. I mean, you get into conflicts of interest and all that, but I guess I'll fire a question back at you. If you were working with an advisor, what are like the three biggest questions that you feel you would want to ask that person?
Well, I think just your point on experience, that's a big one. As far as understanding what they've learned from the years they've been in business.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know, and not just getting hung up in the amount of years they've been in business, because we know you can have somebody do anything in a career for 15 years, and after year one, they've really stopped learning. And versus somebody who's been in a career for 5 years, super hungry, very diligent with what they're looking into and quickly adds on 10 years worth of experiential knowledge because they're wanting to learn. I think definitely asking an advisor what they see as is most important for what they've just heard that person state of their goals. And to understand, to be listening carefully to make sure the advisors listen to them. They haven't become presumptuous because they've heard similar stories, similar objectives day in, day out for the last 10 years, but that each person is being treated differently and heard for the first time here. So I think that's definitely one of the questions. I think the question about how you get compensated, I think that's an obvious one that's going to come up. But again, that's quite subjective in how that's valued. You could say, well, we charge X amount, but then if the advice you're giving saves that person 3X or 3 times that amount, this is very valuable, even if on average it might be a little more expensive.
Sure.
And so again, they're looking to hear value. They're looking to hear, some synergy there, some chemistry between you and them. But also, I would be asking, can you give me some examples of families, or not obviously by name, but people just like us? What type of clientele would be the average type of person you're working with here? And get an idea of, yeah, this could be a really good fit.
For sure. And I'll go back to the experience point a little bit. The way that we phrase it, or the way that, is advantageous for me at this point in my career is like, you look at how long you've been doing this. I'm finally able to say I've been doing this for 12 years, which is
Right.
pretty good. But on the other side of that, I'm in a sweet spot now where how long are you going to be doing this? If you're meeting with an advisor who's 70 years old, yes, they've got 50 years of experience, which sounds good. But if you're retiring and you're 55 years old and your advisor is 70 years old, they're probably not going to really help you through the next few stages of your retirement. So again, I like to think I'm in a sweet spot where I've got enough experience to know something, and I've got years ahead where if I've got a client retiring, I'm still doing this for another 30 years and they don't need to worry about being in the middle of their retirement, be left without anybody to lean on.
That's a great point, Alex. It reminds me of an example we had as a client when I was advising, and this person had relocated from New York to California, quite a wealthy family, and he asked the principal of the company exactly that question: what is a succession plan? Well, we had a succession plan in place. But then he looked at the other 2 directors there and said, and what's the situation if he dies tomorrow in a car accident? Who's looking after my stuff?
Yeah.
And it was an interesting question where you could see this guy's done his homework here. Now, we did have a response for that too. But yes, to think about that person's life seamlessly. I think advisors, we think understandably about our business being seamless for us and ideally for that client, but what's most going to help that client have their seamless experience with your firm?
Yeah, and it's actually another one of the questions on our PDF that we hand out is what happens to my money if something happens to you as the advisor? If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what happens to my clients? So I think if I'm a client meeting with an advisor first time, I want to ask that. I especially want to ask that if I'm working with an older advisor. And that's not to say you shouldn't work with that older advisor. Maybe they have a great succession plan in place. Maybe they've got a younger person that works in their office already that's going to be taking over their book of business. But if that is the case, like maybe you do want to meet that younger person that's taking over to see not only do they know what they're doing, but is it a good fit? It might be that they are very competent, but the personality fit's not there, or they're competent, they're a great personality, but they've already got 500 clients that they're working with. And if this older advisor disappears, they get another 500, and there is a scale issue there. Whereas an advisor, I know I can only help so many people. So it's an interesting question that also made our list. Thoughts on like different models of advisors? If you're a client, would you look for? Now, I know I would look for an independent advisor, but do you see value in the way that the advisor might be set up?
I think there is value in all the different areas, but that's again coming right back to the individual. Because I've seen some great stories from people who are bank advisors. I've seen some horror stories. Same with I love I've met a load of credit union advisors, but again I've seen some horror stories there. And across the board it's like doctors. You can get great doctors at a certain hospital, certain institution, but you can also get not great ones. I think what's super important is the expectations. And to have that transparency, this is how, for your fee, whatever way they're going to be paying that, here is the value you're going to be receiving. And here is the contact structure that's set up and in place. This is what you can expect when you email me or when you call and leave a message. You're not going to be able to get to me every time because I'm going to be in meetings just like this one. But know this: when I get a message from you, then you've got your process. So I think you're really to start with looking for that chemistry. And when I say chemistry, I don't just mean warm fuzzies. You need to know, it's just like a surgeon. You need to know this person is competent and confident with their competence.
Mm-hmm.
And so can communicate that. But yeah, you've got to see, you definitely want to see the value for money, what to expect, and know how that's going to be measured. So there's clear communication and no one's disappointed 5 months from now.
Yeah, all good points. I think one of the things that gets in the way for clients is like this inability to, I'm gonna get the saying wrong, see the forest through the trees, or maybe it's the trees, whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
They get caught up in like a nitty gritty detail of either the stock that they're invested in or the fee they're paying the advisor, the specific product recommendation, if you can even call it that. And they get focused on that, and it gives them this inability to move forward. They're stuck in the headlights and they don't want to move forward. So what would your advice to a client or somebody in the situation be if they're having a hard time moving past one specific detail to really take action and implement their financial plan correctly?
I think some of the ways you put it there are super important. You've got to see this as one piece of the puzzle. And it's true that piece does have to be in its place at the right time, but it does have a particular place. If it's one piece out of 100-piece puzzle, there are 99 other pieces that have also got to be in their place. And so from a novice or someone who doesn't have that investment or planning acumen that you guys have, they shouldn't be trying to do this themselves. And then this is one of the things I think we're seeing more often out there in society, where people are recognizing when they're hitting like those mid-50s, late 50s, it's very expensive to undo mistakes. Very expensive, both sometimes financially, but definitely in time. And so when they get hung up on one particular little thing, that exactly how you explained it is super important for someone to be able to say, hey, we've got to step back and keep perspective. Because when we look at the headlines and the noise, especially with what we're in the midst of right now, it's very easy. Firstly, so many people have fragmented attention spans. They're often distracted. But secondly, then it's very hard for them just to stay focused on any one particular thing. And when they can hear the advisor say, we're watching the bigger picture here as well as the smaller pieces. This is what we do. And say that again, confidently and competently, then that person has to understand, I need to take my hands off the wheel a little bit here. It's like going to that doctor and saying, hey, but these are the pills I want to be taking. Or going to the doctor and saying, you know what, you don't need to see my blood pressure. You don't need me to weigh in. This is my issue. Well, as a doctor, no, I got to see everything. I need to get a total picture of you as a person. And so often I think people coming to advisors think, well, I'll have this little bit over there. I'll be my play money and I'll keep this over there. And they don't need to know about this piece. But you wouldn't do that to your doctor. Or if you did, you couldn't expect them to be able to diagnose thoroughly.
Right.
So they've got to realize they need to be transparent and at least have you see where everything is at. So you can then best diagnose of how we want to get literally from point A to point B and get you to the choices you want to have in 10 years' time.
Yeah, transparency is hugely important. It's always amazing to me that, somebody would agree to pay a fee for financial advice or for financial planning, however you want to say it, and then leave out very relevant details. And it's frustrating as an advisor because it is a little bit like, why are you paying me to do this if you're not going to let me fully do it? And then I think the other thing that you mentioned in there was just the noise of the media and the politics and whatever it is. And I can count, maybe 5 or 6 people that I've met with in the last handful of years that seem to be extra politically charged, where they either were not taking action because they felt that whichever guy was in office at the time was going to end the economy as we know it. And you look back at somebody that's had their entire portfolio sitting in cash since
Right.
2015, and you do the math on how much money they left on the table, and it's like a gut sinking feeling to think about that. And it's, as an advisor, it's hard. It's your money at the end of the day. Whatever you want to do, we have to do. But do the thing, invest the money, stay in the market, don't get emotional about it. It can be very hard to get people to see that. And I think the way you phrase it is correct. You got to block out the noise, do what's in your best interest, and maybe just don't watch the news might be a good thing.
But here's part of the noise, Alex. You imagine, and this is where our industry, where the finance industry differs a little, unfortunately. We every single day at the top of the paper or at the top of the web page or whatever we've got, we're seeing stock market results and what it did yesterday and what's happening globally. Imagine if every single morning, coming back to the surgery analysis, imagine if every single morning we saw every single result of every single knee surgery. After a while, everybody'd be walking around, hey, I know how to do knee surgery. In fact, I might do my own tomorrow. and it's that same kind of thing. People just don't realize, they don't recognize it like that. It's the same kind of thing with finances.
Sure.
And so, unfortunately, because of all that noise, they tend to overlook and devalue advisors like yourself who no, this is what I do. This is my specialist field, just like a knee surgeon. And so people get familiar with everything and commentaries and what have you. And then, immediately they think this isn't that hard. Well, it is.
It is. And I think the surgery example is good. I've heard other people use the example of like real estate or their house. One of the nice things about investing in real estate is you don't wake up every morning, log into your account and see a value. Whereas with what we do, you can check your 401k 5 times a day if you want to. And now you're like, oh no, it's up 2%, it's down 2%. You get emotional about it. Whereas your house, yes, it fluctuates in value. And I guess in the modern world, you can go onto Zillow or whatever website and you can see like the Zestimate. You can see what your house might be worth. But unless you're actually planning to up and move, like you're not going to do anything about it. Whereas people go into their investment portfolio, it's down 5%. And it's what am I going to do? And the answer is you should do nothing. You should stay invested. You should get used to that. So it's interesting. The emotions are a big part. I think a lot of people would be better off just not looking, but you can't say that too loud.
Yeah, that's right. But you're right. Doing nothing is an action. It's just like when people say, well, you know what? I'm not going to make any decisions for right now. I'll come back and maybe I'll revisit with you in 3 months' time. I don't want to take any action. No, that is an action.
Yeah.
And so it's just to your point, when you're working with clients and where you're coming from is we're just staying still right now. In fact, we are not moving a thing. For reasons. And so oftentimes then people can look and say, well, what am I paying you for? It's just, you're paying me for making that decision because you can make a number of other decisions that are going to be harmful. We've made the right decision to stay right where we are.
Right.
And so
it's also,
that's devalued.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it's also, it seems that no matter how you phrase it or how many times you have this conversation with clients, it's people focus in on the investment return and like they see that as what they're paying for you. In reality, the fee that they're paying to an advisor should be, if they're working with the right person, not just the investment management, but the tax planning, insurance planning, the distribution planning. There's so many things that we should be talking about, but none of those things are showing up on your account when you log in the morning. So you get focused on that.
Yeah. And they're the crucial things. The equities market, the balance in that account is going to go up and down literally by the 10th of a second. But the crucial things, if somebody passes away, if your life insurance or estate planning isn't buttoned down, and the worst time in your life, if you've just lost a spouse, you're then having to come back and face this as well, that's just chaotic. And at the same time, then the IRS is just licking their chops because that planning wasn't done when it should have been. You're going to cut an unnecessary big check to them, where for the sake of talking with someone like yourself and seeing, hey, coming back to the real estate analogy, let's make sure this foundation is in bedrock before we get excited about building up and out. Let's get the foundation set to begin with. And it's not sexy or fun, because when you buy or sell a house, it's not like you go, hey, but you'll never guess what's 6 feet under this earth here. It's foundations of rock. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
can I see the bedrooms again? Because I like the color. No one thinks about that.
Yeah, it's probably not always a perfect analogy, but it makes the point. It's, again, not getting distracted by the noise, staying the course,
Yeah.
and making sure you're making the best decision, not just like the gut reaction. But the real estate, you don't have the gut reaction because it's not that liquid. You're stuck until you list it and sell it and all that. Like the
That's
soonest you
right.
can possibly sell your house is a couple months.
Yeah. But coming back to that point, Alex, having moved across from the Bay Area, I can tell you from watching condo developments close to ours, when you've got to go back and reset foundations, it's expensive. I mean, it's really expensive. It's way more expensive than anything cosmetic or like paint or wallpaper. When you've got to dig back down and reconstruct foundational stuff,
Mhm.
it's tough. So yes, to what you were mentioning about the planning and setting those things that people think are just, man, that's a little boring. No, it's mundane and super, super important.
Sure, that's everything.
Yeah.
Change gears a little bit. So we've talked a lot about why work with an advisor, those kinds of topics. What are your thoughts on the future of financial planning? And what I mean by that is, I guess the robo advisor world isn't exactly new anymore. Those have existed for
Right.
a while and they've evolved. And now we have this AI thing that's coming in. How do you feel that'll change the landscape of what people like me do every day? And how should it change the approach that regular clients take towards their planning?
Yeah, interesting timing. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Boston, and we saw a company talking about just how that's growing, and they showed some examples of how they've been using it, and it is phenomenal. It was the first time I felt like I was starting to understand it, and even then, it's amazing. You're not going to replace human interaction when it comes to empathy and trust. And as a way of proving that, just look at WebMD. WebMD is a brilliant, in-depth medical site with answers to everything. But I'm still not going to do knee surgery on myself or put my knee up to a video and try and have somebody do something from a laser perspective. I'm going to be under a surgeon, and that's where I want to be. So I think there are a lot of utilitarian functions that AI is phenomenal for now. But when it comes to trust, and especially trust in one of the most important areas, our finances. So, like we've been talking about, medical, health, and finances, two biggest items for all of us. We're not going to give those over to any kind of machine learning. I just don't see that. I just don't see that happening.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. I do see the possibility of a future where AI and robo advisors, of course, create more tools that we as advisors can use,
Mhm.
which is hugely
Absolutely.
important. The software, even in the course of my relatively young career, has developed tremendously. Like the planning
Right.
tools available today versus what we had in 2012 when I was first exposed to it, it's totally different. And I
Right.
think that it's become more interactive. I can have clients in and put things on the screen in our conference room and walk them through different scenarios. I can do the same thing on a Zoom meeting and be able
Yeah.
to do that. Whereas before we had this static plan that was printed off and Mr. and
Yeah.
Mrs. Client, here's your financial plan. Here are the papers. It's 90 pages. Go
Yes.
home and read through it. Let me know if you want to change anything. And
Yes.
it didn't
Yeah.
result in anything.
Yeah. And the next day at 2 o'clock, they've got one of the most beautiful leather bound door jams you could ever have. But to your point about that, I remember, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences where you're seated in front of a couple and you'll mention something and you'll just see one look one way and the other will have a different expression on their face. And you know immediately there's something here. Well, AI is not going to notice that to the degree that you're going to see that and be able to, hey, let's come back to that question. When I mentioned this, there was a visceral difference in response from you both. Let's talk about that. And I'd really love to hear what's behind your response, Sarah, and your response, Jim. And then all of a sudden, you've uncovered some real foundational issues that are good to uncover, but that you can then address. A computer or AI ability, I know it's going to get great. I know it's going to become frighteningly effective, but I just don't see it being as effective as we are as people.
Sure. Yeah, and for my own job security, I guess I'm hopeful it doesn't get too good. I agree
I'm
with
actually
you.
a hologram here, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not even real. Who knows? Very cool. So I've asked you a lot of questions, but I want to give you an opportunity before we cut things off here. What's on your mind? What other questions do you think we should be addressing?
I think the areas I love looking through your website, and I think the areas that you're covering personally on the site for your clients, it's exactly what people are needing. I love the transparency there with what you're providing, but I do think people have got to be open about coming to see people like yourself and just putting it out there and realizing, hey, there are people that are doing this, seeing so many other scenarios and are equipped to help to help the new client super effectively. I think things are only going to get more challenging. I was going to say tougher, but I think more challenging with issues of tax, of interest rates, of inflation, of the global circumstances. And as people's bandwidth and attention spans are reducing and reducing, they need to rush to hand this section of their life and to be working with guys like yourself. So that's how I feel. Like I said, I've been an advisor. I've been on the same side of the table, and I would be encouraging people to dial in. To your point with the questions, ask the questions. Ask other people the questions as well. I'm guessing that you're getting the same response from prospective clients as we got, which is when they'd start a conversation by saying we're interviewing 2 or 3 people. At the end of the conversation, it was like, what are we waiting for? Let's just get rolling. So I just encourage people to look you up and at least start going through that questionnaire with you.
Well, great. I appreciate the vote of confidence, especially.
Yeah.
I think we'll end it there. I think we're at about the time that I can ask people to listen to me talk for. Paul, how can people find you if they want to learn more about you or hear more of your insights?
Sure. So I am at paul@paulkingsman.com. You can email me there. Kingsman.com is my website. I speak to advisors, and then I also head up practice management at a firm called Ash Brokerage. So I work with advisors all day long and love it. That's what I'm passionate about. So I'm there at Ash Brokerage, but then also paul@paulkingsman.com for personal email.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Alex.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.